What if the Pirates decided to go even cheaper than cheap? Not just frugal, but full on clearance rack baseball. Let's talk about why they might, how they could do it, and what it would mean for fans. Next on Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to Locked On Pirates. I'm Gary Morgan. Today we're wrapping up our three-part series on how the Pirates could reach 83 wins, or at least pretend they're trying. In this final installment, we're diving into the cheapest possible path. We'll explore why they might go ultra frugal, how they'd pull it off, and what kind of fallout it would cause. It's not the path anyone wants. It's also, in my mind, the most unlikely, but it's one we have to consider. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. So why would the Pirates go ultra cheap? And again, before I get into this one too much, let's just lay out the expectations. I don't believe this is the way that the Pirates will go this year. I'm just putting it out there as a possibility because, frankly, I think a lot of you think it's the worst case scenario. And also, this is kind of selfish on my part. I think a lot of people saw this version of what I'm going to go through as the eventuality of the Pirates moving on in the GM search. If they were to replace Ben Cherington, I think there's a lot of people that felt like the first thing somebody would want to do when they come in here is clean house a little bit, get rid of some contracts that they don't want. Well, let's get into it. If ownership believes a shutdown is coming in 2027, if they think it's inevitable, they could potentially want to bottom out the payroll before they get there. That's at least a working theory that I know is very popular with a lot of fans. That could mean starting early, like even as soon as right now, to start softening that financial blow. I personally don't believe that this is going to be a motivation for it, but I know it's something that a lot of you are worried about. Now, it hasn't made sense to me, if only because if they were going to go into something that they felt pretty sure they were going to come out of it with a salary cap, I don't think that they care about this stuff at all, because the money that would be rushing back in and the changes to the game, it would really kind of make this period of time irrelevant. But we've seen the Pirates make cheap decisions that don't really help them beyond a few weeks before, right? Like, like trying to trade a guy like just to get rid of his prorated salary when there's really no reason to make the trade. You're not going to get anything of value back. But we've seen them do things like that just to save a few dollars, cutting guys before they hit their bonuses, towards the end of the season. So if you're going to make decisions like that, I suppose something like this still has to be on the table too, even though you would completely get mostly everything recouped. The other thing I was thinking about is if Nutting feels this team is too far from contention, like despite what Travis Williams said about the playoffs and despite keeping Ben Cherington and what Ben Cherington thought, it might very well be that Bob doesn't believe he's giving them enough money to fix the problems that are on this baseball team to meet the standard that they're trying to pretend they're shooting for next year. And if that's the case, my thought is, well, he didn't fire them because ultimately he's going to have them execute this sell-off, so he's got them as scapegoats rather than whoever he hires as a brand new employee. If you were going to do something crappy like that, wouldn't you want that on guys that probably have one foot in the grave? I mean, I'm just thinking it through. as far as like a scenario as to why you would go into this sort of an approach where you just want to go as cheap as you possibly can. The last thing I'll say is it might have minimal impact. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. They don't pay anybody on this team. So, with only Reynolds and Keller really making money, trading both of those guys, it wouldn't really be a full teardown. It might just be an admission that the team wasn't close enough to begin with. If you really think about it, when you talk about like a team selling off, when you go around and you look at their most expensive assets and how they can save money and where they can save money and you look around and you see two guys on the Pirates, Brian Reynolds and Mitch Keller. That's it. Everybody else is in the beginning stages of arbitration, if not their rookie deal. And you're not going to get a lot cheaper than any of those. There would really be no reason to do it. This isn't like this isn't the same situation as we've had in the past where you're trying desperately to trade off anything that looks like it might return some kind of value. Yes, there's a financial side to that whole thing too. Of course, you're trying to make your roster cheaper, but there's a purpose. You're selling off things of value in the hopes that you'll get young prospects that you can get to time up and make this magic theory of small marketdom come true where you can put together a team that actually wins. Well, they're at a different spot now. I think they could move the only two guys that cost money, bring back prospects and or whatever. But if it's going to be cheap, it's going to be prospects. And backfill those spots with internal options and guys that are already here. And I have to ask the question. I could be completely way off on this, but it's just in the top of my head because I toyed with not doing this episode, if only because I feel like it's very unlikely. But there was something I could not get stuck. I couldn't get out of my head. I just could not get past the fact that I kind of couldn't argue myself into this team being measurably worse if they moved on from those two players and replaced them with internal candidates. I expect Brian Reynolds to do better. I don't want them to move him in any way, shape, or form. But last year's performance was bad. It would not be out of the realm of possibility to see a guy like Connor Griffin come up here and produce easily what Brian Reynolds did last year. And if it did, I bet we'd be saying we're disappointed in Connor Griffin, frankly. So your expectations are probably a little bit higher than what Brian Reynolds did last year. So could I go upgrade? Yeah, I guess. But wouldn't you rather have Connor Griffin with Brian Reynolds? Of course. I'm just leaving the door open that this is something they might consider. And for those very few reasons that I had to outline there. It stands to reason I have to next tell you how, and I kind of already let the cat out of the bag with Brian Reynolds and Mitch Keller, but let's get into it a little bit more and some other things that it might spawn this team to think about and try to execute if we moved into next season with this ethos. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride that hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to the fourth quarter big comeback. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game interesting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com and sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Make sure you smash that subscribe and the like. Comments have been off the chain for this series so far. You guys are killing it. The AMA show on Friday is going to be baller because of it, for real. Make sure you're asking questions about these follow-up shows too. I got a ton from the first one, a few less from the second, and maybe that's because some of you were kind of jumping ahead on the test, to the next question that we hadn't even gotten to yet. But make sure you get your questions in a reasonable time. I'll try to do this a little bit early-ish afternoon so that you guys have some time to make sure you get your questions in, and I've got time to digest them. But we'll make sure we get this one knocked out tomorrow afternoon. So, how'd you do it? Obviously, I just stated in the first segment, you would trade Brian Reynolds, then you would trade Mitch Keller. They both are the only two that really make money on this baseball team. The waiver wire and international and internal promotions would really be your main mechanism for bringing in any more talent or filling up any holes that you needed to fill. You'd avoid free agency just about altogether. Maybe you'd get a reliever here or there. I mean, you are shipping out, if you were to move both of those guys, excess of $25 million. So you should be able to go and get something else. But the only point of doing this is that you're going cheap. So if you're moving those guys, I'm assuming you've made a bigger decision and you're not really going to try to sugarcoat this roster up as best you can anymore. Now, I could argue that the pitching staff won't take too much of a hit from it. If they were to somehow squeak into the playoffs, I think that's when you would feel it most, because that's when a lot of your guys are probably falling off towards the end as they've worked to brand new records for all of them as far as innings pitched goes. And I think you're probably tiring out as a unit by then. Also gone largely all kids, and you're asking Paul Skeens to be the power, truth, and the glory for the entire starting rotation. That might be fine, and he certainly is that on the field. But I love the layering effect of having a guy like Mitch Keller around. But if you move him again, I can argue with myself and you, if I need to, that the starting rotation is probably not going to go backwards really from that. I mean, there's some guys that I expect to take steps forward anyway. Like I expect Johan Oviedo to get a little bit better next year. I expect Mike Burrows to steady a bit more, show a little bit more of what he became as his opportunities increased. And I expect Hunter Barco and Bubba Chandler to be better next year. And hell, I expect Paul Skeens to even improve in some way. So I guess I could argue that you'd be okay moving on from Mitch Keller, but I don't think that it's a bet that I want to have to make. Get what I mean? Like, it's not something that I think I'd force myself into. Brian Reynolds is harder. I mean, he's been one of the better hitters here. He's a switch hitter. It's like exactly what you have to have for an everyday guy nowadays on a team like this. You're gonna play a guy every single day like that. He needs to be a switch hitter most likely, or at least needs to be able to hit both sides. And he's one of the few that has. Now, last year he didn't. Last year he wasn't good. I could pretty easily find ways to replace that offensive production. The thing is, man, that's not the offensive production that I expect this year. I say this because I hear it from you. That's not the impression a lot of you have. A lot of you think that Brian Reynolds is on the way down, or at least on the other side of the hill. You don't necessarily have to think that he's trending down, but you probably don't think that he has it in him to trend up again, right? It's funny that a lot of those same people are the people that are telling me that the Pirates should go out and sign like JT Realmuto. He's a 34-year-old catcher. Like if you really think that Brian Reynolds is on the decline at 32 or 31, well, maybe stop suggesting that they bring in these 34, 35, 38-year-olds. I don't think that you're going to get a lot better there either. That said, it is a reality that Brian Reynolds probably isn't going to start going in the other direction. The thing with Brian Reynolds is I've always kind of put him in this weird bucket. I've always thought Brian Reynolds is probably an excellent player on a really good team. But if you're asking Brian Reynolds to be your best player, which this team has for half a decade now, well, that's not fair. I actually think they went into last season asking O'Neal Cruz to be their best player. Position players, too. Don't correct me with Paul Skeens, okay? And don't pretend he can hit at this level either, because even he would tell you he can't or wouldn't want to try, okay? I've heard him say it. But you went into it and you ended up with Brian Reynolds being your best player again. Best all-around player. And he had a down year. I think you could probably realistically replace his production from last year and do it pretty affordably. Problem is, when I say pretty affordably, I mean kind of right around what you're paying Brian Reynolds. So I don't think there's much of a benefit here. But this isn't really about my opinion on the subject. This is more about how they would go about doing it. And this is the way. They could probably move some other assets if they really wanted to get even cheaper. Like you could take some other guys who are on arbitration and starting to cost a little bit of money, like an O'Neal Cruz or whatever. But I got to be real. O'Neal Cruz, I think, is still so cheap, even with his arbitration, that you'd be hard pressed to make that look like a halfway intelligent move. I don't think it saves you hardly anything. I don't think you'd be getting much in a trade with him. His trade value is probably in the tank from last year. So I just don't see the wisdom in doing it. I don't see anybody really that's going to cost a ton of money. I really don't. And I think you'd probably be hard pressed to do that. Now, when I say avoid free agency altogether, I mean, you want to be as cheap as you possibly can. I would imagine you have to take that all the way out, right? You can't be bringing back Andrew McCutchen for $5-6 million. You wouldn't do anything like that. If you want to go as cheap as possible, they probably have a team here. They probably have a team they can go with already. And I can't sit here and definitively tell you it would be markedly worse than last year. If you think about what I'm heading into 2026 with right now in my head, I'm bringing back Brian Reynolds and Mitch Keller. And I'm telling you that most of the improvement on this baseball team is still banking on guys like Henry Davis, Nick Gonzalez, Spencer Horwitz, Jared Triolo, Connor Griffin, Esmeralyn Valdez. Those are the guys where the dreams are pinned, man. Those are the guys that are going to bring improvement to this team. And they can take my approach from the very first installment of this, and yeah, they can augment around. But even when I told you my plan, what did I mention? Gonna have to have internal improvement. This team's gonna come back 90% what it was in 2025. There's no way to do that without expecting internal improvement. So if I already expect internal improvement, and I'm sitting here telling you the cheapest way they could go is to get rid of two guys and do nothing else, how much worse are they going to get? Really? I think I'm still due to get those improvements that I was just calling out. Truth? I mean, can we at least pinky swear on that one? I think that's where we're both at. So how much worse would they really get by going super cheap? I only ask because it's probably about as much better as they'd get if they spent a little bit in free agency like I suggested in the first one. I think they maybe take a little bit of like a 5-6 game step back if they do something like this. Again, because their pitching is so reinforced, and Brian Reynolds had such a terrible down year last year. So moving these two guys off, it just doesn't have the impact that the name value tells you it should. Just like when I made my suggestions in the first one, I'm counting on these guys bouncing back and doing better than they have. I'm not selling you that they're going to get to that 83 win mark because of my additions alone. It's coming with improvement. Every step of the way that we've talked about this team in this 3-part series has come down to needing some level of improvement from some guys that are definitely coming back. This is no different. We've just subtracted a couple guys that we counted on. That's all. And they can take a step back from that for sure. But now that I've kind of made it make a little more sense, sound a little bit more plausible, maybe you understand why I ended up doing this episode, because I talked myself into it being plausible. I talked myself into this being something that someone could talk Bob into. I don't think it would be Ben Cherington talking him into it, mind you. I think it would be about the last thing he'd want to do, honestly. But if you want scapegoats, you've got them in-house right now, Bob. You know, let's take a quick break and come back and let's talk about wrapping this whole series together. I know we just kind of did that a little bit, but I'll do it better. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The new Stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph's points, threes, and assists. It's the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Hey, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Let's just go through what we've talked about in this series a little bit. Okay, we first did mine, and in that one, and this was Tuesday's episode. We laid out a strategy for reaching 83 wins with a $35 to $40 million allotment of cash that we felt we could spend in some way, shape, or form. So I included targeted trades like Santander from the Blue Jays and Soderstrom from the A's and Yoshida from the Red Sox. Low-cost free agents or mid-tier free agents like Trent Grisham or Ryan Helsley. And retaining Andrew McCutchen. It's a plan that's built on realism, not optimism. And I assumed that the team would spend just enough to compete without breaking character. Now, in yesterday's installment, we did typical Pirates. And in that, we explored the Pirates' tendency to reallocate payroll without improving talent. The team placed a few guys on waivers. We discussed that, and we questioned whether Mitch Keller might be traded to free up salary. But the focus is on internal development and returning players like Kutch with minimal external signings expected. So I think yesterday show probably felt most natural to some of you. It didn't seem like there was any kind of outside the box thinking involved. It seemed very piratey. That's at least a lot of the comments I got. That's exactly what people thought they were going to do, except a lot of people kind of leaned in on what I just did today, which is cheaper than cheap. We were now looking at the absolute floor, a scenario where the Pirates go ultra cheap, possibly in anticipation of a shutdown or as a way to shift blame. Trading Reynolds and Keller would cut most of the payroll. And the team would rely almost entirely on internal options and waiver claims. So let's weigh the three paths. Realistic path or my path, whatever, however you want to call it. It's the most likely scenario if they genuinely want to compete. It allows for modest investment, some creativity, and plausible improvement without violating their philosophy. Yesterday, typical Pirates, it's default mode. Internal development, minimal spending, hoping for a bounce back. It's the safest bet if they do nothing bold. Cheaper than cheap? Well, it's the least likely, not impossible. It's a hedge against future uncertainty. And while it would anger fans, it's a move that internally, frankly, they already know you're mad. They already think you'll come back when and if they win. I honestly believe that's where they are mentally. So cheaper than cheap remains an option, if you ask me, until I don't see it. You could also go with the cheaper than cheap method by accident. And we talked about this in yesterday's episode too, when we discussed the Mitch Keller trade and whether you should or shouldn't do it. One of the ways that you can get trapped into the cheaper than cheap category is if you wait for the perfect deal for Mitch Keller, and then you get caught with your pants down. And everything that you wanted or pretended you wanted to do with that money is now off the table or no longer an option. And then you get backdoored into cheaper than cheap. So, in a way, our third installment could be a complete accident. It could not even be the intention. It could just be because it took them so long to execute a part of what they considered to be their plan or typical Pirates. And they got it done, but they got it done too late for it to affect any deals that might come after it. Unfortunately, cheaper than cheap remains viable, right? I mean, honestly, as I talked, I know that you guys don't want to see it. It's not like you're rooting for it. But I guess I want to make sure I come out of this episode with you understanding why I couldn't eliminate it, why I couldn't take it off the board, why I couldn't just cast it aside like, nah, that's crazy. It won't do that. I couldn't toss it aside because I think it could happen by accident. And I think just given a little bit of effort, you might be able to talk Bob into it being smart. The Pirates are probably going to follow somewhere in between my path and typical Pirates. Not because it's ideal, but because it's really the only way that they can balance cost control with plausible competitiveness. They spend just enough to say they tried, while keeping the door open for internal growth and future flexibility. I love how you guys have participated in this series. I'm glad that you listen to them every day. I got a lot of the comments from the same people every single day, which was great. We'll keep doing things like this as the off season goes on because these weeks can drag on. But if we do series like every week where we're kind of making sure that they all play together and we're talking about subjects in a really well-rounded way, I think there's a benefit to doing it. So we'll probably keep trying to do things like this as we move forward. The Pirates will probably follow that path, and I'll be happy if they do. Because it might be the best I can get, and it would avoid the cheaper than cheap. This is the final chapter of Operation 83 Wins. I'm really happy that you were all here. Thank you so much. Remember, we're serious about Pirates baseball because somebody has to be.